I spent 3 months modding a game for one of my most ambitious projects yet. While I've spent a long time modding games in the past, I've only ever made ported content until now. This is the first time I've done anything completely original. In this video, you'll witness the ridiculous amount of work required to create an original mod, and hopefully gain an appreciation for this form of artistry. I hope you enjoy. So, I've been absent from my main channel for quite a while, haven't I? It's been over 4 months since my last video, and that's because there have been several major changes around these parts. I'm more of a streamer now than a video producer, and I've been posting a lot more on my Jack 5 Clips channel. So whenever I came back to my main channel, I wanted my next video to be a big one. And I think going forward, this channel will largely focus on massive personal projects of mine. Fortunately, the time has come where I've made something worthy of this status, a custom vehicle in BallisticNG. Now don't let the sound or look of that fool you. This mod was absolutely the hardest thing I've ever worked on in any video game, causing me to sacrifice so much of my time for it. There are quite a few parallels between what I did as a hobby and what people do in the video game industry for a job. The stuff that I talk about in this video may even prepare you for what's ahead if you're going into that field. As an example, my Turbine and Marble Blast video is still helping the Platinum Quest community, even if only to dissuade people from using Torque Constructor. This video is basically just that, but for a different game and with a different vision. But even more than that, it's yet another exercise in torture, where I gradually lose my sanity for cheap laughs from my audience. So basically, most people will have a reason to watch this. With that preamble out of the way, it's now time to recount what happened starting on the 23rd of September 2022, when I began to do what others have been warned about, after filling you in on some necessary context, of course. So what is BallisticNG, and why did I decide to make a mod for it? First of all, it's not BeamNG, so don't expect any fancy crash simulations. BallisticNG is a racing game that pays heavy homage to the Wipeout series, most famous for appearing on PlayStation consoles. Wipeout pioneered anti-gravity vehicle simulation in a 3D environment, combined with extreme speeds and weapons on the racetrack, and this was done 1 year before Mario Kart 64, which only achieved 2 of those 4 things. After the dissolution of Studio Liverpool, the developers behind the series, people were left wondering if this style of gameplay would die out. Fortunately not, as BallisticNG was released on Steam in 2018 and has been receiving continual updates since then. This includes support for custom tracks, vehicles, and code mods, which change many aspects of the game. Of course, there are Wipeout mods for this game, and almost everyone new to the game asks where they are, to the point where it's become an inside joke. What BallisticNG's community truly wants is for people to play this game for what makes it original and to contribute original work. Fortunately for them, I never played any of the Wipeout games as a child or had even heard of them at the time. I'm a Gran Turismo fanboy, so if anyone could fulfill the wishes of the community, it would be me. All I had to do was model a vehicle from scratch in Blender, design the default livery for it in Inkscape, create tons more in Paint.net, import everything into Unity, and finally race it in-game for hours and tweak every single parameter until I knew it was completely finished. Do I never learn? As I have explained in the past, I do not have fond memories of using Blender, and I pin the blame on the application being overly complicated and my lacking ability in 3D modeling. When I made my video game for university, I created as little as possible in Blender, and I didn't worry about scale either, as I would assemble everything in Unity afterwards. But this time, I had no choice but to make the whole thing as one object in Blender, so if I wanted to do this, I would have to know what I was making beforehand. I knew I wanted to make a flying vehicle with the appearance of a car, something similar to a Nissan 350Z, which I have an unhealthy obsession for. This led me to draw a couple of sketches of those 2 core concepts combined. Unfortunately, my first sketches ended up being a speedboat instead of a car, without me even realizing it, but at least I could use them as a means of getting familiar with modeling in Blender. Now, as a person coming from Hammer, where all you do is cut slices out of cubes, I really wanted to manipulate my model along a grid on each axis. This is bad practice for most modeling work, but BallisticNG's vehicles are all low poly, so it was the perfect approach. Blender already had a grid, but my vertices weren't snapping to it no matter what I tried. So down I went through the rabbit hole of Blender documentation and tutorial videos, trying to figure out what the shortcut for snapping was. I'd eventually find it, but all it did was start snapping vertices to arbitrary points in the scene. After even more online research, I discovered that every Blender project defaults to metric units, but if you want to snap points to the visible grid, you need to set the unit system to none, whatever that means. After figuring that out and turning on the mirror modifier, I was finally free to start start creating my model. Many subdivisions, manually created edges and faces, texture painting, and hours spent figuring out ambient occlusion later, I finished modeling this prototype version of the vehicle, got it into Unity, and exported it into the game. It worked great. Now I just had to start over and get the design right this time. My next attempt produced far better sketches of the car I was thinking of, and I also laid out how powerful I thought it should be compared to the default vehicles, which ended up being terrible estimations just like my first sketches. Regardless, I set about working on the model and iterated on it a couple of times until I was fairly certain it looked complete. Compared to what I started with, the spoiler was now actually a spoiler, the cockpit no longer looked like something from the Jetsons, and the front didn't taper off to a point. I even added ways for air to flow around the bottom of the vehicle for added authenticity. Naturally, the next step of this whole process was to set up the model for texturing, and oh boy was this a nightmare to do. The ultimate goal of this step was to make sure that anyone, including myself, would be able to create their own skins for the vehicle with ease, and the only way to do that was through UV unwrapping. 3D modelers say this is their favorite part of the modeling process, and I didn't get that joke until now. It was incredibly annoying to have to auto unwrap, resize, and move each individual segment of the vehicle over and over. It certainly didn't help that Blender does not let you snap vertices by pixel. I had to eyeball all of this, constantly moving the 3D cursor around to make sure everything stayed aligned when I resized stuff. Once I was done, I made sure to create a guide so it would be as easy as possible for anyone to get started with skinning. Yes, I genuinely went to this level of effort. Even people who don't own BallisticNG should still be able to create custom skins, so long as someone else takes in-game screenshots. But I wasn't going to ask for skin contributions immediately. I had to create a couple of standard liveries as an example. There was a catch. You see, the thing about any custom content one might want to make for BallisticNG is that it's all expected to tell some kind of story. Being based on the Wipeout series, whose games often have lore-heavy manuals, BallisticNG also has extensive lore for each vehicle and track told outside of the game. This meant that I had to spend more time thinking about my vehicle than actually building it. I eventually settled on the following information and called it a day. My vehicle's name would be the ASMO Formauto, ASMO being the acronym for the German-based company Automatische Simulierte Maschinenorganisation, or Automatic Simulated Machine Organization. Why German? Well, the acronym ASMO was based on a meme I saw on the BallisticNG Discord that I found funny and wanted to make part of my mod, and using Google Translate, German was the easiest language to set this up for. As well as the acronym, establishing a connection between ASMO and one of the already existing racing teams would flesh out the backstory, and there was a German team called Orbitronics. Perfect, I thought. I can easily write this into a backstory. ASMO would have worked for Orbitronics in the past to develop technology for outer space, but would pivot away when they saw they could exploit that technology for profit on Earth. They wouldn't steal anything, rather they would develop their own line of anti-gravity vehicles and remain on good terms. Unfortunately for them, they were using the meme name at first, and so they were ridiculed by the media. That, as well as their ties to Orbitronics, would be the reason they would be banned from competing in the anti-gravity league, since no Steam Workshop vehicle is ever officially added to the game. That wouldn't stop ASMO though, as they would recover by switching to the acronym, investing heavily in advertising, and entering third-party racing leagues. This, I felt, was a perfectly acceptable amount of lore to go along with my mod. Now I could start working on the liveries. When I began texturing, I wasn't at all confident in my ability to create designs in Paint.net. Considering that these liveries are mostly made with one-color polygons, I thought that using Inkscape, a vector-based image editor, would surely be faster. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Sure, Inkscape would save each individual shape I drew and allow me to adjust their points whenever I wanted, but it had its own problems that made it far more annoying to use than Paint.net. There were constant slowdowns whenever I panned my view, as Inkscape would reload those portions of the canvas every time. Additionally, the application never remembered the custom axes I set up for mirror symmetry. I had to include my desired coordinates in the layer group names, as every time I loaded my project, they would snap back to the default whenever I made any edit. These two issues alone forced me to return to Paint.net once I completed the basic design, and I never used Inkscape again for this project. Not to say that Inkscape is a bad piece of software, it simply didn't fit into my usual workflow. Paint.net was way faster in the long run, as not only could I make all 3 required textures for each livery with ease, but I could also quickly copy parts of my finished liveries to make new ones. Despite this, there were some things that my favorite image editor couldn't save me from. Panel lines, a standard feature on every BallisticNG vehicle, were so hard to conceptualize that I got some help from ZeroMan04, one of my Discord members, who sketched some out for me. I also required a native German speaker's help to come up with the ASMO slogan. We settled on Innovation durch Simulation, which you could probably guess the meaning of. Getting that slogan on the vehicle was also a challenge, as you can't flip text like you can polygons. polygons. Since it needed to be angled, I had to perfectly match the opposite angle, size, and position every time I worked on the reverse side. The only other major issue I had was figuring out how to create all the layers of dirt, wear, and tear to make my vehicle truly fit in with the standard lineup. And thankfully the BallisticNG community was able to provide me with advice on that front. Everything after that was pretty much all smooth sailing, and I ended up designing a total of 15 liveries completely on my own. Here's the default skin in all its glory. This needed to be perfect in order for all the others to turn out well. For that reason, I spent way too much time getting these curved vinyls to look good no matter what direction you look at them from, along with the standard process of dreaming up a design, creating it, being unhappy with the result, and recreating it over and over until I was satisfied. Once I was over that hurdle, I could get a little more creative with a base design already under my belt. The Neon Knights and Masano Island skins, for example, are based on BallisticNG DLCs, with an emphasis on city life and coastal life respectively, the latter even having lifeguard iconography. Outer Reaches is another DLC, and because it takes place in space, it gave me an excuse to incorporate Asmo's relationship with Orbitronics into the skin itself, even editing Orbitronics' logo to include Asmo's main color. These are very simple designs, as are many of the other skins, but I'm able to get away with them thanks to the panel lines and layers of dirt. If those didn't exist, the vehicle would definitely appear bland and lifeless. A few other liveries I'd like to highlight include a blatant advertisement for my YouTube and Twitch channels, I am a content creator after all, an abandoned skin with a whole bunch of graffiti that ties into my YouTube lore, comment below if you figured out what it means, and a couple based on car designs from Gran Turismo. Even some of my Discord members made their own skins, and they'll be credited on the mods page. That pushes the total livery count well beyond the maximum number of vehicles per race. I definitely won't feel the urge to have to make more after this video's release with that amount of content. There was one more potential problem though. In order for all of this effort to have been worth it, I needed to ensure that my vehicle would actually be used. To achieve this, I created a custom campaign, the Asmo Form Auto Pro Circuit. This campaign, in addition to me testing the vehicle on speed lap for an uncountable amount of time, was how I figured out what the stats of the vehicle should actually be. My original estimated stats were overpowered as hell. I won't bore you with the excruciating details of my struggles any longer, so I'll just say that this car does really well on tracks that are mostly straight, yet if too many tight bends are stacked against one another, it will start to slip behind. Beating the campaign is required to unlock a gold livery, as I know most people would prefer to get a reward for their efforts, so there you go. But where can one download all this stuff? Well, the vehicle is available now on Game Banana and the Steam Workshop, and you can also download the livery kit on the same Game Banana page, which includes everything one might need to create a custom skin of their own. The custom Pro Circuit campaign is also available on Game Banana, as are all the other campaigns I've made before I finish this project. By the way, if you're watching this and you don't own BallisticNG, then consider the energy I've expended on this project as a personal recommendation. I've been keeping a list of how I feel about all the games I've played, and BallisticNG is tied with Gran Turismo 3 and 4 at the very top, so I'm serious when I say that you should definitely consider getting it. The controls will require getting used to, but once you're over that hurdle, the feeling of racing at extreme speeds, duping the AI, and earning platinum medals is truly exhilarating. Honestly though, I'm glad that this project is finally finished. It took me 3 months just to finish the vehicle, and then I had to spend another month wrapping up the campaign and this video to go along with it all. I'll continue to support the mod for a little while after its release, such as by officially including community liveries and making any requested balance changes to the stats, but I don't think I'll be making another vehicle anytime soon, or ever again now that I think about it. In the same vein, I don't know what my next project will be or when I'll be able to reveal anything about it, but I thank all of you that have stayed dedicated to my cause, even with the slow rate of uploads. For those new here, my Discord server is the best place to be notified of everything that's going on around these parts, and a link to it will be in the top right corner of this video and in the description. If you want more frequent content, follow me on Twitch or subscribe to the Jack5Clips YouTube channel. I've also put all the necessary links to check out BallisticNG and download my mods below. Anyway, I'm exhausted, I'm gonna go rest, so thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you all next time. This video is dedicated to Nalexa for funding this channel. I would say something about New Year's resolutions, but those never work, so I won't even bother. Here's to many more sessions of video game torture in store for me.